At 77, I was used to being invisible, but not like this. Not sitting at a bus stop in a navy skirt suit, heels pinching, watching dusk settle over an empty street while waiting for a ride that would never come. They'd said it wouldn't be long. After the reception, Mom, Rachel had promised over the phone. Just wait by the bus stop near Main and Spruce. We'll swing by on our way back. I didn't question it, just nodded, even though she couldn't see me nodding, and even though my heart had done something strange at the phrase after the reception. But I told myself it was just scheduling, just logistics. I even smiled when I hung up. That was 6 hours ago. Now the wedding was long over, must be, and the town had gone quiet. The few cars that passed didn't slow. No familiar faces. I'd brought a wrapped gift, something modest but thoughtful, and a little tin of shortbread I'd baked that morning. They sat beside me on the bench like two small, useless offerings. I shifted on the wooden slats. My legs were aching. I'd never liked this bench. It faced the gas station, and the air always smelled faintly of rubber and fried food. But Rachel had said this stop, not the one by the park, and I didn't want to complicate things. Didn't want to be difficult. A boy on a bicycle passed, earbuds in. He didn't look twice at me. No one did. I checked my phone again. No signal. Just the blinking low battery icon. I'd meant to charge it, but between baking and ironing the skirt and writing the little note to Rachel, I'd forgotten. There was a time, many times, when she would have reminded me. "Mom, don't forget your charger," she'd say, half smiling, half sighing, like I was a child. But those days were gone. I remembered when she told me about the wedding. "It'll be small," she'd said. "Just family." Her fiancé's parents were paying, she explained, and there were limits. "You'll still be part of it. We'll figure something out." I should have noticed the way her voice faltered, the way she rushed past the details. But I wanted to believe her. I always wanted to believe her. The last city bus rolled by, brakes screeching, lights bright against the darkness. It didn't stop. I watched its taillights disappear, and something inside me finally dropped, like a door clicking shut. I was not forgotten. I was excluded. And that's not the same thing. The breeze turned cold. I clutched the shortbread tin, not for warmth, but for something to hold on to. Behind me, in one of the houses lining the street, someone laughed. A warm, hearty laugh. I imagined a living room full of voices, full of people who didn't know I existed. Rachel's voice echoed in my head. "Just wait at the bus stop." I waited, all night, until the streetlights flickered off and the sky turned gray, until the bakery van came down the street, too early for morning and too late for night. I rose, stiff, and began walking home, heels in hand, back straight. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. By the time I reached home, the sun was already pushing its way through the clouds, lighting up the chipped paint on the porch rail and the weeds in the cracks of the front steps. I stood there for a moment, key in hand, unwilling to go inside. The weight in my chest hadn't moved. It had simply settled, like dust in an untouched room. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and the oatmeal I'd forgotten on the stove. I walked past the cold pot, placed the shortbread on the counter, and set the unopened gift carefully on the hall table. It looked ridiculous there. The little silver ribbon, the neat square corners. I'd wrapped it with such care. There was a handwritten card inside. For Rachel and Tom, love always, Mom. I made tea without tasting it, then sat at the kitchen table and opened my phone, plugging it into the wall. The screen flickered to life. notifications flooding in. One of them stopped me cold. A photo, posted by Rachel's new sister-in-law, a girl I'd met only once. It showed the happy couple under a string of golden lights, surrounded by beaming faces. The caption read, "A perfect evening, just family." I stared at it for a long time, zoomed in. There was Rachel in her cream lace dress, bouquet held just right. Tom, tall and awkward, grinning, his parents, his brothers, Rachel's cousins, her friends from college, her godmother even, everyone but me. "Just family," the caption repeated. I pressed the phone to my chest, as if I could muffle the sting. A simple sentence typed by someone who didn't even think twice. But it was sharp enough to slice through skin. I tried to find some alternative explanation. Maybe she'd meant something else. Maybe she hadn't seen the caption. Maybe she hadn't thought it would matter. Maybe the photographer had insisted on something quick, and she'd meant to make it up to me later. A separate celebration, a brunch, a quiet apology. But then I saw the next photo, and the next. There was no separate anything. There was a dinner, a long candlelit table with name cards and linen napkins. There was laughter, dancing, toasts, a slideshow of Rachel and Tom's life, baby pictures, college days, their first apartment. Nothing of me, not one image, not one mention. I had been carefully, deliberately written out. I sat at the table, tea untouched, hands curled in my lap. I tried to remember the last time Rachel had looked at me without some edge of embarrassment. The last time she'd asked how I was, not what I could do. The last time I'd felt like her mother, not her problem. There was a time, many years ago now, when we had been close. After her father died, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts at the clinic, skipped meals so she could have school books, saved every spare dollar for her ballet lessons and braces. I didn't expect thanks. I expected only that we'd be each other's home. But slowly, subtly, she'd begun to change. It started in college, when she stopped calling, when she came home only on holidays, and then not at all. When she began to speak of my house as the old place, of my clothes as quaint, of me as a bit much sometimes. She never said it outright, of course, but I saw it in her eyes, heard it in her sighs. I was no longer a source of strength or comfort. I was baggage. The wedding had made it official. I rose from the table, walked to the hall mirror. The woman looking back at me was small, pale, with smudges under her eyes. Her hair, still thick, was pinned back. The way Rachel always said, looked tired. Her hands, veined and dry, still held a faint tremor. But her spine was straight, and her eyes, despite everything, were steady. I picked up the gift from the table and unwrapped it. Inside was a photo album I'd spent weeks putting together. Prints of Rachel's childhood, pictures I'd digitized and edited myself. Each page told a story. Her first steps, her Halloween costume at age 6, the time we built a snowman with mismatched gloves. I looked through every page slowly, carefully, as if saying goodbye. Then I placed the album back in its box, walked it out to the trash bin, and let the lid fall shut. My daughter had thrown me away. I was simply returning the gesture. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay in bed with the lamp on, watching the shadows on the ceiling change with the passing hours. Around 3 a.m., I got up and made toast I didn't eat. At 5, I started writing a list. Not of groceries or chores, but of memories. Not the warm ones. Not birthdays or lullabies. The others. The time Rachel came home from college and insisted I stay in the kitchen while her new boyfriend visited. "You just make things awkward, Mom," she said, brushing past me. I'd laughed, pretending not to hear. The time she borrowed $4,000 for a course she never finished. Promised to pay me back. Never mentioned it again. The day I brought her soup when she was sick, and she told me gently, kindly, that next time I should just text first. I kept writing until the paper ran out. But then, of course, I also remembered the years before all that. The real years. When she was small and everything between us was simple. I remembered the winter she had croup, and I stayed up 3 nights holding her upright so she could breathe. How I sat in the rocking chair, humming the same lullaby until my throat went raw. I remembered making her Halloween costumes by hand, sewing tiny ears onto a felt cap for her mouse outfit, gluing feathers for the owl one. She used to tell people, proudly, "My mom made this." And I remembered the time her father died. My Tom. And she'd crawled into bed with me and cried herself to sleep holding my wrist, as if afraid I'd vanish too. What had I done with those years? I'd folded them into casseroles and school pickups and savings accounts. I'd traded them for security, for her comfort, for her chance. I'd told myself again and again that love meant giving. But I had never asked what I was receiving. The funny thing is, I never wanted much. A phone call. A birthday remembered without prompting. A visit that wasn't scheduled like a dentist appointment. A conversation where I wasn't edited for her comfort. Those were the things I missed, not the grandeur, just the little human things that tell you you're still visible. After breakfast, tea, toast, silence, I went to the sideboard and pulled out the box with all the old financial files. It was a habit I'd kept from my nursing days. Everything labeled, everything organized. Inside were envelopes marked Rachel, college, Rachel, car, Rachel, down payment. I opened one of them, a cashier's check from 2012, $18,000, for the used Prius she wanted to get around LA. "It's safer than the train, Mom," she'd said, "and I'll pay you back in installments." There were no installments. I opened another envelope. Bank statements from when I co-signed her apartment lease. Another. Receipts from the wedding dress deposit. She hadn't told her fiancé I'd helped with that. I stared at the numbers, trying to feel something sharp. Anger, resentment. But instead, I felt a kind of weary awe. All this, and still not enough to be family. And the thing is, I'd do it all again if she ever needed it. If she ever came to me as a daughter, not a manager of her image. But I wouldn't let myself be erased anymore. Not quietly. The phone buzzed just after noon. A message from Rachel. "Hi, Mom. Hope you got home okay. Sorry we couldn't come by. Things ran late and Tom's parents had everyone over for drinks. Let's catch up soon? Love you. Love you." I stared at these 2 words. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a soft wraparound phrase like a Band-Aid pressed onto an open wound. I didn't answer. Not then. Instead, I stood, put the kettle on again, and went to my bedroom closet. I reached to the top shelf where I kept a small wooden box, the kind with a lock, though I'd long since lost the key. Inside were the documents I hadn't looked at in years. My will, a few insurance forms, the note Tom had written me before his surgery, the last one, telling me in clumsy handwriting to take care of our girl. She's soft in the middle, but strong where it counts. I used to believe that. I used to think I could guide her with love. But maybe love without boundaries isn't guidance. Maybe it's just surrender. And I was done surrendering. It was a Thursday when I walked into the bank. Not because I had any urgent task, but because I needed to see what I had, really had, and what I was still giving away. The young man at the counter blinked at me with that polite smile they reserve for old women who smell like lavender and carry a handbag with tissues tucked in every corner. "I'd like to review my active transfers," I said, steady, "and see which accounts are connected to my daughters." He hesitated. "We can certainly review recurring transactions, ma'am. As for connected accounts, I'm listed as a secondary on her mortgage," I said calmly, "and I cover her insurance policy. Health, car, renters. I also make quarterly payments to her alma mater for a loan I co-signed 12 years ago. I can list them all if you need." His fingers twitched over the keyboard. "Let me just pull that up, Mrs. Morrison." I hadn't said that name in a while, not since Tom died. For years I was Rachel's mom, or just Mom. Now I wanted my name back. He printed out a neat summary of my automatic payments. 3 pages, single-spaced. I sat in the little consultation room, reading each line like it was a page from someone else's book. Rent support, insurance. Medical bills for Rachel's husband, who never called me anything but ma'am. A private tutoring fee for Lily, my granddaughter, who hadn't visited in months. There was a $129 transfer every other week for Rachel's dog groomer. I remembered the day she'd asked for that, pretending it was just until things level out. That had been 18 months ago. The last item stopped me cold. A $2,000 payment scheduled for next week. A honeymoon contribution, marked discreetly as gift. I hadn't even been at the wedding. I pressed my hand to the table. "Would you like to make changes, ma'am?" the banker asked softly. I looked at him, really looked at him. A boy with a new suit and perfect skin, and I imagined his mother somewhere, probably still packing him lunch when he visited. "Yes," I said. "I want every single outgoing payment reviewed and most of them canceled. All except 2. The college savings plan for Lily, she's only 13, and the local shelter donation. Everything else ends today." He didn't flinch, just typed. "And the mortgage?" he asked. "You're listed as a co-signer, but the payments come from your account. I'll inform my daughter. From now on, she's responsible for her own roof." I signed the forms. My handwriting, once elegant, now slightly trembling, still firm enough to make a mark. Back home, I stood in the hallway, looking at the photos on the wall. Not the formal ones, not weddings or graduations. I focused on the quiet ones, Rachel asleep on my chest as a baby, her muddy soccer uniform and toothless grin, her high school play, standing in the back, half hidden in the shadows. None of these were in her wedding slideshow. None of these memories had followed her to adulthood. I passed my fingers over the frame edges, as if trying to feel something again. Then I took them all down. Not in anger, but because I needed space for myself. It's a strange thing, realizing your child has grown into someone who can hurt you, not out of cruelty, but out of convenience. Because shame can be quiet, passive, well-dressed. It can sound like just family and look like a polite smile that never quite reaches the eyes. That night, Rachel called. I didn't answer. Not out of pettiness. I just didn't want to hear her voice until I could listen without shaking. Instead, I opened a fresh notebook, and on the first page, I wrote, "What I want now." It took a long time to write the first item. Not to be useful, not to be needed, just to be treated like someone whose heart still beats. And then I made tea. And for once, I sat down with both hands wrapped around the cup, not holding it for anyone else. The next message from Rachel came the following morning. No greeting, no question, just, "Mom, can we talk? There's been some confusion." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, with more calm than I expected, I put the phone down and made toast. Dry, no butter. My stomach didn't want indulgence, It wanted clarity. Confusion, she said. That's what they always called it, didn't they? When they forgot to invite me. When I wasn't included in family emails or Lily's school recitals. It was always a mix-up or someone else's fault or something that slipped through the cracks. I was the crack. I washed my cup slowly and looked out the window. 2 houses down, the neighbor's daughter was planting flowers with her mother. Young woman, maybe late 20s, with the same tilt of the head and laugh as her mom. They looked like a pair. Not identical, but united. You could tell, just watching them, that they didn't need to rehearse love. It was lived. I dried my hands and returned to my chair, picked up the phone again, and opened Rachel's message. Still no follow-up. She hadn't called. She hadn't asked how I was after being left on a street bench for hours. No apology. Just confusion. I replied, "There's no confusion. Please direct any future inquiries to your own bank accounts. As of yesterday, mine no longer support you." I hit send before I could soften the words. 5 minutes later, she called. I didn't answer. I could imagine her pacing, hand in her hair, the slight high note in her voice when she felt cornered. She'd use words like misunderstanding, unintentional, logistics. She might even cry. I'd always been helpless to her tears. But tears didn't wait with you on a dark bench for 6 hours. Tears didn't rewrite captions like "just family." So I turned the phone off. Around lunchtime, I heard the mailbox clatter. I wasn't expecting anything, but I went to check. Just bills and a glossy wedding magazine with Rachel's name on the address label. She'd had it sent here years ago and never changed it. I thumbed through the pages without care, then tossed it in the bin. In the afternoon, I opened the folder marked Will and Legal and sat back at the kitchen table. It wasn't out of revenge, it was out of recognition. I was not going to be the woman who quietly leaves her savings, her house, her everything, to a daughter who saw her as a footnote, who would host brunches in this very house, smiling sweetly at guests while saying, "This was Mom's place," as though I were a vase that once sat on the shelf. My name was still on everything. But not for long. I looked over the old will. Simple, standard. Everything split, mostly to Rachel. Some to Lily for education. Rachel was the executor. I picked up the pen, made a note to call my lawyer, then another, to talk to the credit union about retitling the house. I wasn't doing this because I wanted her to hurt. I was doing it because I finally believed she could. And I couldn't allow that anymore. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The street was quiet, save for the low hum of someone's television through an open window. I watched the stars blink into view, one by one, and thought about silence. Not the lonely kind. The powerful kind. The kind where no one is yelling or demanding or pulling your heart in all directions. Just the kind where a woman sits with herself and knows, finally, that she does not need to be picked up or invited or captioned to exist. The lawyer's office was warm, lined with dusty books and a half-dead ficus plant in the corner. Mr. Harrington was older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly now. He adjusted his glasses as he flipped through my file. "So," he said after a moment, "you'd like to make some changes to your estate plan?" "Yes," I said. "Significant ones." He nodded. "Still leaving something to your daughter?" I looked at him over folded hands. "Not this time." He didn't flinch, just turned a page. "And your granddaughter?" That was the question I'd come for. Lily, the only one who ever remembered my birthday without a reminder, the only one who once called me from school just to say hi, who used to curl up next to me on the couch and ask about my childhood as if it mattered. She was 13 now, already slipping into that quiet teenage world where affection becomes sparse and words get chosen carefully. But there was still something true in her, unpolished. She hadn't learned yet how to hide people in the background. "She's the only one I want to leave anything to," I said. "College fund?" he asked. "Yes, but more than that. I want to set up a trust." He raised an eyebrow. "A full trust? With early access?" "She'll be 18 in 5 years. If I'm not around, I want her to know that someone believed in her. Not because she was useful, but because she was kind." We spent the next hour drafting paperwork. I gave instructions in a calm, practiced voice. It surprised me how steady I felt. Not triumphant, not bitter, just clean. Before I left, Mr. Harrington looked up from his notes. "Mrs. Morrison, I see these cases more often than you'd imagine. Parents disrespected, written off, children forgetting who raised them." I smiled faintly. "I didn't raise Rachel to forget. I raised her to survive. Maybe that's the same thing." He handed me a copy of the draft documents and walked me to the door. "You're doing something brave." "No," I said. "I'm just done doing something foolish." At home, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at Lily's name, printed in bold on the trust folder. I pictured her as she was at 6. Freckles, missing front teeth, asking me to read the same book again and again. I hoped that girl was still in there, somewhere. I didn't tell Rachel about the trust. Not yet. Not out of secrecy, just clarity. If she ever asked, I'd answer. But for now, I wanted this to be clean. A quiet line drawn. I walked to the living room and found the old photo of Lily and me at the beach, her hand in mine, both of us squinting in the sun. I dusted the frame and set it on the mantel where Rachel's picture used to be. The house didn't feel lighter, but it felt more mine. The next morning, I sent a letter, not an email, not a text, a real letter, handwritten. "Dear Lily," it began, "I don't know when you'll read this, but I want you to have something that belongs only to you, something not wrapped in conditions or guilt or expectations. I want you to use it well, not because I expect it, but because I trust you. I always have." I didn't sign it with "Love, Grandma." I signed it, for the girl who never made me feel invisible, M. Then I folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the trust folder. Later that day, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first, thinking maybe it was a delivery. But it rang again, sharper this time. I opened the door. Rachel stood there, flushed, breathless, holding her phone like it was a badge. "Mom, we need to talk." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel smaller than her. "I'm not angry," I said, "but you can't fix this with talking." She opened her mouth. I raised a hand, gently. "Not now." And I closed the door. Quietly, not a slam. Just a full, final click. I didn't lock it, but I didn't open it again either. That evening, I found myself in the attic, not looking for anything, just standing among old boxes and the smell of dust and cedar. It's strange how you start cleaning when your heart is cluttered. I hadn't been up there in years, not since Tom's last winter, when we'd packed away the Christmas decorations and never brought them down again. I sat on an old footstool, brushing off a box labeled Martha Nursing Days. My own handwriting, slanted and careful. Inside were scraps of a different life, a tarnished stethoscope, hospital badges, a few certificates. One corner of the box held photographs. Me in white scrubs, younger, sharper, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. I had been capable once, respected. People trusted me with their lives. Now I was the woman people forgot to pick up, the woman they excused in whispers. I found another box marked Tom and M. I opened it slowly. Letters, birthday cards. One of them read, "You always know how to bring me back to myself. Love, Tom." I held it for a long time. He would have known what to say now. Or maybe he wouldn't have said anything at all. Just poured 2 cups of coffee, sat beside me, and let the silence hold everything that words couldn't. That was his way. His dignity was quiet, but never weak. I realized I hadn't spoken his name aloud in weeks, months, maybe. "Tom," I said now, voice low, like a secret. "I'm sorry I lost myself." I leaned back, my hand resting on the box like it was a warm shoulder. I hadn't always been this diminished version of myself. I had danced barefoot in the rain once, laughed so hard I scared the dog, fought for patients when the hospital system tried to ignore them. I had opinions, sharp ones, and I'd never needed to be sweet to be good. So when had I stopped being Martha? The first crack came when Rachel turned 13 and told me, with the conviction only a teenager has, that I didn't get it. I started tiptoeing around her moods after that, softening my voice, avoiding the clothes she called frumpy. Then Tom died, and I poured everything into her. My grief didn't get a shape. Hers did. By the time she was in college, I was afraid of upsetting her, afraid she'd drift further away. So I said yes to everything: the car, the rent, the silent disappointments. I stayed useful, thinking it would keep me needed. But being needed and being loved are not the same thing. Back downstairs, I opened the wardrobe and pulled out the navy dress I'd worn to the wedding. That wasn't. It was still on its hanger, the tissue paper from the store crumpled at the bottom of the closet. I put it on, slowly, smoothing the fabric over my hips. I didn't look pathetic in it. I looked composed. I looked like a woman who had waited in the cold and learned something in the silence. I sat at the vanity and brushed my hair, still thick, still silver. Rachel once offered to pay for me to get it done properly. I had said no. Gray is not shameful. Gray remembers. That night, I took out an old journal and wrote 1 sentence across a fresh page. I used to be someone. I think I still am. I didn't sleep much, but when I did, it wasn't restless. And in the morning, I woke with something steady inside me. A kind of stillness that didn't ask for permission. The phone was full of unread messages from Rachel, but I didn't open a single one. At the pharmacy, I stood in line behind a woman with a toddler and a tired expression. The child kept grabbing candy bars, and she kept setting them back with one hand while digging for her insurance card with the other. I waited quietly, my prescriptions in a white paper bag under my arm, watching her juggle chaos with practiced calm. When it was my turn, the pharmacist greeted me with the forced cheer of someone halfway through a long shift. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison, you've got a pickup for Rachel's household too." "One moment." I blinked. I didn't request anything. "Her husband's prescription. It's under your account. Autopay is set." My fingers stiffened on the counter. Of course it was. "Can you cancel that?" I asked evenly. The pharmacist hesitated. "You're authorized, yes, just, are you sure? It's a monthly refill." I gave her a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yes, I'm sure. If there are any concerns, Rachel can handle them. They had a wedding recently. I imagine they're doing just fine." She nodded, avoided my gaze, tapped a few keys and handed me a receipt. "It's done." Outside, I sat on the bench near the bus stop. Not that bench, not the one from that night. A different one, in front of the library, under a yellowing maple. It smelled like ink and late summer. I hadn't said no in years. Not like that. Not clearly, not cleanly. Not without apologizing for it. But as I sat there, the fear I expected didn't come. No trembling hands. No wave of guilt. No frantic mental rehearsals of how to explain myself. Just quiet. A soft, heavy kind. The kind that comes when a door finally closes that should have been shut a long time ago. That evening, Rachel called again. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Mom, I saw the payment didn't go through for David's medication. That's fine. I'll handle it. But I wish you'd just told me. We can talk, you know. It doesn't have to be like this. I feel like there's a wall between us lately. I'm just confused. Confused. That word again. It had become her shield. Her cover for anything she didn't want to face. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my journal and wrote, "When someone builds a wall to keep you out, it's not your job to knock it down. It's your job to stop standing outside, waiting to be let in." The next morning, I went to the market. For the first time in years, I shopped just for me. I didn't buy Lily's favorite cereal. I didn't grab the imported coffee Rachel liked. I didn't check prices with someone else's pantry in mind. Instead, I picked a small wheel of brie, a jar of good marmalade, a bottle of dry rosé, a new potted plant, basil, for my kitchen windowsill, and a paperback novel I hadn't read in years. At checkout, the clerk smiled. "Looks like you're planning a quiet evening." "I am," I said, "and it's going to be lovely." Back home, I lit a candle, not for mood, but because I felt like it. I poured a glass of wine, made toast with marmalade and cheese, and sat in my kitchen with the sun warming the floor tiles. For the first time, the house didn't feel like it was waiting for someone. It just felt full of me. The message came mid-morning, short and sharp, like a stone thrown through glass. "Mom, what is going on? The mortgage payment bounced. So did Lily's school bill. Are you okay? Please respond." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, not even because I was angry. I wasn't, not in that old frantic way. It was just that nothing in the message asked how I was, only what was going on. Why weren't things functioning? Where was the money? The concern in "Are you okay?" rang hollow, like it had been added for structure, not feeling. A second message followed an hour later. "I'm serious, Mom. This is starting to affect our credit. If there's something wrong, you need to tell me." And then, when I still didn't answer, "I don't understand why you're acting like this, after everything I've done for you." That one made me laugh. I laughed aloud, in my kitchen, in my house that had always been quiet and tired until recently. It was the kind of laugh that doesn't feel joyful, but necessary. A bark of disbelief? Disbelief that had nowhere left to go. Everything she had done for me? I stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the thickest folder. Rachel, support. Tabs and notes and copies of checks spanning 25 years, rent, tuition, medical bills, groceries, that failed attempt at a business she swore would pay off in 6 months. Everything she'd done? The only thing Rachel had ever done for me in the last 10 years was ask for less than usual when she felt vaguely guilty. Still holding the file, I walked into the living room and sat down in Tom's old armchair. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope, not angrily, not with grief, but with finality. I wasn't playing this game anymore. That evening, she called again. I watched the screen glow, then dim, then glow again. I let it all pass. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced through the peephole. Her car. She stood there, jacket thrown on, arms crossed, her phone in hand. I didn't open the door right away. I let her wait, not to be cruel, but to measure something inside myself, to see if the shaking would return. It didn't. When I finally turned the knob, her face brightened for half a second, then fell when she saw mine. "Mom," she started, "we need to talk." "Do we?" "I don't understand what's happening. Everything's bouncing. I had to call the school and delay tuition. I'm not paying for your life anymore, Rachel." She blinked. "But why?" I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me, standing with her on the porch. "Because I waited for you," I said, "at a bus stop, in heels, with a gift in my lap, for hours." She exhaled sharply, as if I'd punched her. "You knew it wasn't intentional. I told you we'd come back. You didn't. You didn't come back, and I saw the photos, Rachel. Just family. That wasn't from me. But it was about you, and you didn't change it." Silence stretched between us. "You left me sitting there," I continued, "and then pretended it hadn't happened. And now what? Now I'm a problem to solve? A check to reactivate?" She looked down at the porch floor, like a child being scolded. "I thought you loved helping," she said quietly. I took a slow breath. "I do. When it's help. When it's love. But what you've wanted from me lately isn't help, Rachel. It's upkeep." Her eyes shimmered. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "That's the worst part." She reached out like she might touch my arm, but I stepped back. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm done." And then I did what I never thought I could. I walked back inside and gently closed the door. Behind me, she didn't knock again. I called Mr. Harrington the next morning and told him it was time to finalize everything. The trust for Lily, the new version of the will, the updated deed for the house. He didn't ask questions, just gave me a time slot, 2:15 that afternoon. When I arrived, the receptionist offered me tea, and for the first time in years, I accepted without asking if it would be inconvenient. It was a small thing, but it mattered. I sat on the upholstered bench and drank my tea slowly, not because I had to wait, but because I finally wasn't rushing for anyone. In Mr. Harrington's office, the stack of papers was already neatly arranged. "It's all here," he said, tapping the folder. "The new will removes your daughter entirely, as discussed. The trust for Lily is clear and protected, and the property deeds now place the house solely in your name, with no joint beneficiaries. You're fully autonomous again." "Good," I said, and picked up the pen. It surprised me how easy it was. No trembling, no second guessing, just ink on paper. He watched me sign each document, nodding slightly as I did. "You're not the first parent I've helped do this," he said quietly, "but I wish more did it before they were broken." "I'm not broken," I said. He smiled. "Exactly." On my way out, I walked past a mother and son in the waiting room. She in a soft coat, him in a blazer too big for his shoulders. She patted his arm. He was pretending not to notice. I watched her smile, not hurt, just patient. I used to be like that. But patience, stretched too thin, becomes something else. Something close to denial. At home, I opened the windows. Let the breeze in. I hadn't done that in months, always worried about Rachel's allergies when she visited, always adjusting the house for other people's comfort. But the air smelled like jasmine and distant barbecue smoke, and it was mine. The phone rang again, just after 5. This time I answered, not because I was ready to forgive, but because silence had said enough. Rachel's voice was hesitant. "Hi, I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I know. I saw the legal notices, the trust, the change of deed. I guess you really meant it. I did. There was a pause, then. You could have told me first. I did. Just not in the way you liked. I didn't think things were that bad. You didn't think, I said gently, because you didn't have to. Another pause, then a softer voice. So what now? We don't talk? You're just done with me? I'm not done loving you, Rachel, I said. But I'm done funding the fantasy that love means servitude. Her breath caught on the line. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then say nothing. Think instead. I hung up before she could find more words. That evening, I pulled out a recipe card from the old tin in my kitchen, one I hadn't touched since Tom died. It was his favorite, beef stew with red wine and thyme. Comfort food, slow and warm. I cooked for myself, not for guests, not for holidays, just because I wanted the smell of it in my house. As it simmered, I set the table for one. My plate, my wine glass, my bread, warmed in the oven. I didn't light a candle. I didn't need to prove the meal was special. I already knew it was. Lorraine showed up just after lunch, uninvited, unannounced, exactly as I liked her. She stepped into my kitchen like she owned the place, set down a tin of oatmeal cookies on the counter, and said, I figured you were either crying or thriving. Judging by the smell, it's thriving. I laughed, the real kind. Not the tired, polite laugh people give when they want a moment to pass. I made stew yesterday, I said. And no, I haven't cried. Not lately. She raised her eyebrows. You always cry. You cry when the lilacs bloom too early. I'm learning, I said, to feel things without offering them up like gifts. She nodded and sat across from me, pouring herself tea without asking. That's the kind of friend Lorraine had always been. The kind who knew where the mugs were and didn't apologize for being part of the furniture. I heard from Dora, whose niece works at the credit union, she said. Word is, your daughter's been having a meltdown over some frozen accounts. I didn't flinch. That's true. And I didn't fix it. Lorraine sipped her tea, studying me. Well, I'll be damned, she said. You finally put the hammer down. It wasn't a hammer, more like a set of keys. I just stopped unlocking the same old doors. She grinned. You always were the softer one between us. I'd have cut her off years ago. I kept thinking I was helping. You were, but helping isn't healing. Sometimes it's hiding. I looked down at my hands. Steady now, no trembling. She said I should have told her before making changes. And did you? I did. Just not in the way she wanted. Lorraine leaned back in her chair. You know what I think? Do I want to? I think you forgot who you were. I think you spent so long being Rachel's mother, Tom's wife, the nice lady from the clinic. You left Martha in the pantry, next to the good china and the real opinions. I didn't answer. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. And now, she added. I shrugged. Now I cook stew for myself. I open windows without asking permission. I write things down. She tapped the table with a smile. Finally. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, the sun warming the kitchen floor through the window. Lorraine reached for a cookie, then glanced at me. You ever gonna let her back in? I don't know, I said truthfully. I still love her. I always will. But love doesn't mean access. She nodded slowly. Amen to that. Before she left, she hugged me tighter than usual, her perfume like lilacs and old paper. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I'm proud of me too, I said. And for the first time in years, It didn't feel like a lie. After she was gone, I stood in the doorway and watched the street. A breeze moved through the trees. No cars, no expectations. Just the sound of my house, my breath, and a kind of peace that didn't ask for permission to exist. And I thought, maybe this is what healing sounds like. Not applause, not closure. Just silence that no longer hurts. The envelope came on a Tuesday, tucked between a gas bill and a flyer for discounted lawn care. I almost missed it. Plain white, my name printed in a young, unsure hand. No return address. I knew before I opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook. The handwriting was messy, the ink smudged in places. Just one short paragraph. "Grandma, are you okay? I don't know what happened between you and Mom, but I miss you. I keep thinking about when we used to make blueberry muffins. You always let me lick the bowl. I hope you're all right. I love you. Lily." No questions about money. No updates from Rachel's world. Just the voice of a 13-year-old who hadn't yet learned how to polish pain into silence. I read the letter 3 times, then placed it on the kitchen table and sat beside it, like it might disappear. I didn't cry, but my throat swelled with something warm, sharp, familiar. I pulled out a note card from the drawer, the kind I kept for birthdays and sympathy messages, and wrote carefully, slowly, in the neatest script I could manage. "Dear Lily, I'm all right. I've just needed some quiet to think. I miss you too. I remember the muffins. I still have the bowl, and yes, the batter tastes just as sweet. When you're ready, come visit. We'll bake something new. Love always, Grandma." I walked to the postbox in my garden, raised the red flag, and slid the envelope in. The wind stirred the lilac bush as I turned back toward the house. Inside, the kitchen looked just as I'd left it. My mug, my journal, Lily's note like a candle on the table. I sat down and read her words again. In them, I didn't hear Rachel. I didn't hear debt or guilt or performance. I just heard the one thing I thought I'd lost: recognition. That afternoon, I cleaned the guest room. The one Rachel always claimed she didn't like because the bed creaked and the sheets smelled like old soap. I changed them, not for Rachel, but for Lily. I fluffed the pillows, opened the window, and placed an old book of fairy tales on the nightstand. Later, I made muffins. Not blueberry this time. Raspberry and white chocolate. I left one on a plate beside the letter on the table, as if to say, "See? I still remember how to be someone's home." The doorbell didn't ring that day, or the next, but I didn't check the street like I used to. I didn't count silence as absence. Because this time, it felt like waiting for something that might actually come. And that was enough. Before bed, I lit a small lamp in the guest room, just in case. Sometimes love isn't in the grand return. Sometimes it's in leaving the light on. She didn't call, she didn't text, she just came. It was Saturday, just after 2, when I heard the soft knock. Not urgent, not demanding, just there. Like a question asked gently, with hope. I opened the door and there she was. Lily, backpack slung over one shoulder, jacket zipped to her chin, hair messier than Rachel ever allowed it to be. We looked at each other for a moment, and then she smiled, shy, a little crooked. "I came for muffins," she said. I stepped aside without a word and let her in. She didn't rush into my arms. She didn't cry. She walked straight to the kitchen like she had every summer since she was 5, dropped her bag by the door, and looked at the mixing bowls on the counter. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to," she said. I handed her the wooden spoon. "You'll still lick the bowl?" She grinned. Always. We didn't talk about Rachel, not at first. We measured sugar and cracked eggs and picked raspberries from the small bush outside, her sleeves pushed up, my apron hanging off her frame. She asked if I still had the old board game we used to play, the one with the plastic castles. I did. We played 2 rounds while the muffins baked. She beat me both times. It wasn't until the kitchen smelled thick with vanilla and berries that she finally asked, "Are you mad at her?" I paused, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "No," I said. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." She looked at me, serious in a way that reminded me too much of her mother. "She said you were being unfair, that you shut her out." I sat beside her. I did shut her out, but only after years of being asked to stay quiet in my own life. She nodded slowly. She gets mad when I ask questions. You don't need to be afraid to ask. She didn't speak for a long time. Then softly, "I don't think she means to be cruel. I think she just forgets people don't exist for her convenience." I looked at my granddaughter, 13, but already seeing things most adults hide from themselves. "I think you're right," I said. We ate muffins in the garden. She asked about Grandpa Tom, what he was like when he was her age. I told her he once jumped off a roof into a pile of hay and broke his wrist, and that he hated the color orange because it reminded him of hospital scrubs. We laughed. And then she said, "I think I want to come visit more." I didn't answer right away. I just reached out and gently tucked her hair behind her ear. "You always can. No performance, no sides." She smiled again, and for the first time, it was entirely her own. Not her mother's version, not one she'd rehearsed. We spent the rest of the day quietly, reading, folding laundry, listening to old records. She found my box of costume jewelry and wore 3 bracelets at once, just like she used to. When I walked her to the bus station that evening, she squeezed my hand before getting on. "I'm glad you wrote me," she said. "I'm glad you listened." As the bus pulled away, I stood on the curb, watching the back of her head through the window. She didn't turn around. But I didn't need her to, because I knew she would come back. And this time, no one had to promise anything. She came back the next weekend, and the one after that. No permission slips, no explanations, just Lily, showing up with a backpack and that same soft knock. She helped me plant bulbs in the yard, learned to roast a chicken, and even asked if she could take a few photos of the old recipe cards for a school project. I let her. We didn't talk about Rachel much. Sometimes Lily would mention her in passing. A test her mom was stressed about, a tense dinner, a slammed door. But mostly, she spoke of books, of her favorite teacher, of a boy who made her laugh in math class but who wore too much cologne. She was becoming someone, not a version of Rachel, just Lily. Then, one Thursday morning, I opened the front door to find Rachel on the porch. She looked thinner, tired. She wore a coat too expensive for its purpose and held a grocery bag in one hand, like it was some sort of peace offering. Inside were chamomile tea, scones from the bakery she used to mock, and a magazine with a post-it note. "Thought you'd like the garden tips." She didn't smile. "Hi, Mom," she said. I didn't step back. I didn't open the door wider. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see the house," she said. "I just wanted to see it again." "You lived here. You know what it looks like." I didn't mean the walls. I crossed my arms. "Then come in and say what you need to say." She stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the hallway like a stranger. She glanced at the coat rack, the framed cross-stitch by the kitchen. "Home is where your voice matters." A piece Lily had made me last month. You changed things, she said. I finally made space. She sat down at the kitchen table, the bag untouched. Lily talks about you all the time. I didn't expect that. Because you didn't think I had anything left to offer. That's not true. But it's what you lived like. Her mouth pressed into a tight line. You stopped helping. No, I said. I stopped enabling. She exhaled, slow, like she was trying not to break. I've been overwhelmed. I thought you understood. You always did before. I did. For years. But then you left me on a bench on your wedding day. You let everyone else call that family while I sat in silence. She didn't argue. For once. I was ashamed, she said finally, of how it would look. You, the old house, your dresses. I thought you wouldn't want to come. That's not shame, I said. That's cowardice. Shame would have brought you back to me. She looked down. Her hands were twisting the sleeve of her coat. I didn't know how to fix it. I nodded. So you left it for me to hold, like everything else. I'm sorry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But she said it. I watched her for a long time. The girl I'd raised. The woman who had forgotten I was more than a role to be played. She hadn't aged as much as she'd hardened. You're not too late, I said. But you'll have to start from the beginning. She looked up. Not with Lily. Not with your husband. With me. What does that mean? It means you show up without asking for something. You listen. You learn who I am now, not just who I was when you needed me. She nodded, unsure. I walked to the door. You're welcome to visit, but not to stay. Not yet. She stepped out onto the porch, carrying the untouched bag of scones. As she turned to go, she paused. Lily loves you, she said. I know, I replied, because she still sees me. And I closed the door. Not to shut her out, but because dignity, once reclaimed, has its own quiet threshold. The house is quiet again. Not the silence of waiting, or absence, or erased names. It's the quiet of something earned. The kind of quiet that fills a space when you no longer need to prove you belong in it. Lily visits twice a month now. She bakes on her own, folds laundry without being asked, and once she sat across from me and said, I think you're the bravest person I know. I didn't answer her. I just held her hand and let the words settle where they needed to. Rachel called last week. She didn't ask for money. She didn't offer excuses. She told me Lily had been different lately, more sure of herself, more opinionated. I think she's learning it from you, she said. I didn't say, I hope so. I just said, good. Rachel still walks carefully around me, like a child navigating a frozen pond. She hasn't asked for forgiveness. I haven't offered it. We're building something smaller, slower, a conversation at a time. I don't need it to be perfect. I just need it to be real. Last Sunday, I planted bulbs in the front yard. Tulips, crocuses, daffodils, things that bloom at different times, things that don't demand applause. My knees ached and my hands shook with the shovel, but I did it anyway. A neighbor passed by, slowed her pace. Spring's going to be beautiful over here, she said. Yes, I told her. It's already started. Inside, the house carries my breath and my music, my photos, my light. No one edits it now. No one asks me to shrink or smooth my edges. And when I walk past the mirror in the hallway, I stop, just for a moment, to look. Not because I need approval, but because for the first time in a very long time, I see a woman I recognize. She's not angry. She's not waiting. She's not quiet because someone told her to be. She's quiet because peace doesn't shout. And maybe that's the story I was always meant to tell. Not about the day I was left behind, but about the life I found after. So if you're reading this, and someone made you feel small in a room you built with your own hands, don't wait for the door to open. Don't wait for them to remember who you are. Stand up, dust off the bench, and start walking. You were never meant to be a footnote. You are the whole story. And if this story found you at the right time, share it. Someone else might be sitting at that bus stop, still believing they were forgotten.